The sun was setting over Cedar Hill, the kind of small town that felt frozen in time. Brick storefronts lined the quiet main street, their painted signs gently fading with age, and flower pots hung from every lamppost like hopeful little reminders that beauty can still bloom in forgotten places. Life here moved slowly, sometimes painfully so, but for Danica Rollins, that slow pace was a blessing. She'd already lived through chaos. Now she craved stillness. Danica sat outside the little cafe on the corner of Main and Fifth, the one, with the hand-painted mural of a sunrise on its wall, and the strong smell of roasted coffee spilling into the street. Her wheelchair faced the sidewalk, and at her feet, her service dog Blue lay peacefully, his ears twitching every now and then. As he picked up sounds Danica didn't notice. Blue was more than a dog. He was her balance, her guardian, her best friend. They had been through it all together, from the early days of recovery at the VA hospital to her first nerve-wracking trip into a grocery store without crutches. It had been nearly 5 years since the explosion in Kandahar, the one that left her buried under rubble with the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears like a war drum. The doctors said it was a miracle she'd survived. Her platoon didn't, and though she came home alive, the war still echoed inside her every day, like a distant thunder that never fully quieted. Danica found peace in little routines now. A coffee at the cafe, a walk, a roll, through the park, and visits to the community center where she volunteered teaching kids about leadership and resilience. She had learned to smile again, though it took time, and even though every step, every push of her wheels was hard-won, she carried herself with a quiet strength that made people look twice. But not everyone looked with admiration. That day, the town was unusually quiet. A few regulars sat outside the cafe enjoying the breeze. Danica sipped her iced coffee, her thoughts miles away, when she heard the rumble. Low and aggressive, the unmistakable sound of Harley engines pierced the stillness. 3 motorcycles roared around the corner, their chrome flashing under the last light of the sun. They weren't the weekend riders who passed through town on scenic routes. These 3 looked like they wanted to be noticed. They parked diagonally, across the sidewalk blocking half the street, and didn't seem to care who was inconvenienced. They were tall, muscular, and dressed in worn-out leather vests with skull patches and chain details that looked more threatening than stylish. One had a patch that read, "Hell Dogs." Another had a tattoo of a snake wrapping around a dagger on his forearm. They laughed loud, not because anything was funny, but because the noise filled the silence and filled them with power. Danica had seen men like this before, bullies, the kind who preyed on silence, who took pride in making others small so they could feel large. She turned back to her coffee, hoping to avoid their gaze, but she wasn't invisible. "Hey, check this out," one of them sneered, his eyes landing on her like a weight. "You roll here all by yourself, or your mutt drag you in?" Danica didn't look up at first. She'd learned not to feed the fire, but the comment burned. Blue stood up, alert, sensing the shift in her body. His golden fur bristled slightly, his tail stiff behind him. The biker stepped closer, towering over her. "I'm talking to you, lady." Danica met his eyes calmly. "Afternoon." "Oh, she's got manners," another chimed in, chuckling darkly. He was bald with a red beard and a sneer that seemed permanent. He walked behind her, placing both hands on her chair's handles. Then, without warning, he gave a sharp shove. Danica rolled forward a foot before locking her brakes. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but fury. Blue barked sharply, positioning himself in front of her, a low growl rising from his throat. "Easy, boy," Danica said softly, placing a hand on his head. A third biker stepped in, stockier than the others. "Look at her. Thinks she's still in the military or something. Girl, you ain't nothing now. No legs, no threat." A few people inside the cafe looked on. One woman reached for her phone, hesitated, then put it down. A man seated 2 tables away pretended to scroll through his phone, glancing up nervously. Everyone knew this wasn't right, but no one moved. Danica took a deep breath. I served 2 tours. I lost my legs overseas, so people like you could walk free. The bald one snorted. Sounds like a waste of a good pair of legs to me. The tall biker leaned in closer, his breath foul. Probably just got blown up doing something stupid. Danica's eyes narrowed. I was evacuating a school. Kids were inside. That bomb was meant for them. For a moment, his smirk faltered. But then he laughed again, louder, trying to shake off the weight of her words. Still got you blown to bits, didn't it? It took everything in Danica not to swing, not to scream. But she had learned control. She had learned poise under pressure. From across the street, a man slowly rose from a bench. He wore jeans, a plain gray shirt, and a ball cap that bore a faded Marine Corps emblem. His gait was slow, slightly uneven. He was in his late 50s, with deep lines in his face that told stories words never could. His name was Alan Reeves, a retired staff sergeant, and he'd been watching. He crossed the street calmly, stopping a few feet from the bikers. You boys need to walk away. Now. The tall biker turned. Who's this? Grandpa come to save the day? Reeves didn't blink. He pulled out his wallet, flipping it open to show a military ID. Staff Sergeant Alan Reeves, United States Marine Corps, retired. Cool story, old man, the stocky biker said. You gonna call your war buddies or something? Reeves nodded. Actually, yes, already did. You've got about 30 minutes before you'll want to be very far from here. The bikers laughed, louder than before, shaking their heads. One even clapped, mockingly. What's that mean? You gonna call the cops? Reeves didn't answer. He just looked at Danica and gave her a small, knowing nod. Then he sat back down on his bench, arms folded, gaze steady. The bikers stood around awkwardly for a moment, unsure of whether to keep mocking or move on. Their bravado was still loud, but something had shifted. They threw a few more jabs, but they rang hollow now. People were watching, but this time it wasn't fear holding them back. It was waiting. Danica stared at the horizon. Her hands rested on her lap. Blue sat beside her, calm now, but ready. Minutes passed. At exactly 26 minutes after Reeves made his call, a low rumble echoed in the distance. But this one didn't sound like motorcycles. It was deeper, heavier. A Humvee rolled into town, sunlight gleaming off its military-grade panels. Then another, and another. One by one, they pulled up and parked. Uniformed Marines began stepping out, calm and orderly, like a silent force of nature. There were about 20 of them. Some young, clean-cut with fresh faces, others older, bearing signs of long service. They didn't yell. They didn't threaten. They simply walked up and stood behind Danica, shoulder to shoulder, forming a line. One of them knelt and scratched Blue behind the ears. Another handed Danica a folded American flag. A third saluted her. The bikers froze. Every ounce of their swagger dissolved. People from nearby shops started coming out. Phones were raised, not for drama, but for history. No one had ever seen anything like it in Cedar Hill. Not like this. A show of respect so powerful, it silenced the entire street. The tallest biker muttered, "What the hell is this?" Reeves finally stood again, walking back over to Danica. "I told you," he said to the bikers, his voice calm. "You had 30 minutes. The bald one looked around, suddenly unsure of what to do. "We didn't touch her." "Didn't have to," Reeves said. "We saw enough." And then, without another word, the bikers walked back to their motorcycles. Their exit wasn't loud this time. There was no roaring of engines, no jokes, no mocking. Just the sound of 3 men riding, away from something much bigger than they had ever anticipated. Danica sat silently, watching them go. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't about revenge. It was about something deeper. The Marines stayed with her for a while. Some sat down, some stood guard. They talked quietly among themselves. A few locals brought coffee. Someone started humming. The national anthem. It wasn't planned. It wasn't forced. It was real. And Danica? She finally let the tears fall, not because she was scared, because she was seen, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. The sun had dipped below the rooftops by the time the crowd around Danica began to thin, but the warmth she felt didn't come from daylight anymore. It came from something deeper, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Unity, brotherhood, recognition. It wasn't about the bikers anymore. It was about being surrounded by people who understood without her having to say a single word. Sergeant Reeves sat beside her once more, sipping coffee from a paper cup one of the cafe workers had handed him. He watched Danica closely, not with pity, but with the respect only someone who had worn the same uniform could give. "You handled yourself well, Staff Sergeant," he said quietly. Danica gave a soft laugh. "I wasn't even sure I was Staff Sergeant anymore. Some days I still feel stuck in that alley in Kandahar, bleeding and praying the dust wouldn't be the last thing I saw." "You never stopped being one," he replied, his voice low but certain. "You fought for this country. You stood your ground today, and you reminded all of us what strength really looks like." Blue gave a soft woof, tail thumping against her chair. The Marines behind them were still scattered around, some leaning on the Humvees, others laughing gently in small groups, watching over her like sentinels. But there was no aggression in their presence, no show of force, just solidarity. A teenage girl who'd been watching from the cafe came over hesitantly. Ma'am," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to say, you're a hero. My brother's overseas right now. I hope if something ever happens to him, he has someone near who's as brave as you." Danica blinked fast, her throat tight. "What's your brother's name?" "Tyler. He's in the Navy, stationed near Bahrain." She reached into her small bag and pulled out a worn coin, an old challenge coin engraved with the crest of her unit. She held it out to the girl. "Give this to him when he gets home. Tell him a sister in arms says, Semper Fi." The girl clutched it like a treasure. "Thank you, really thank you." Danica nodded and watched her go, then whispered, "Come home safe, Tyler." Later that evening, the Marines began to roll out, one vehicle at a time, each one giving a slow nod or salute as they left. Reeves lingered. So did two younger Marines, both Iraq veterans who'd driven 4 hours to be here the moment the message reached their phone. No orders, no summons, just instinct and brotherhood. As Danica prepared to leave, she turned her chair toward Reeves and asked, "Why'd you come? You don't even know me." He looked at her with eyes worn by years of loss and victory. "I didn't have to know. You wore the uniform. That's enough. When I heard what was happening, I made one call to one of my guys. By the time I got here, half the platoon had already spread the word. These days, it's easy to forget we're still family. But today proved we haven't forgotten." Danica nodded, her chest aching in the best way. "Thank you for reminding me. I'm not alone." The 3 Marines walked with her to her van, Blue hopping in first like he always did. One of the younger guys, Martinez, helped secure her chair into place. He hesitated before closing the door. "Ma'am, what happened?" "Today, that doesn't happen everywhere. But we'll make sure it does more often. Veterans look out for their own." She smiled. "Then the world's still got a fighting chance." That night, when Danica got home, her phone buzzed non-stop, messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. Friends from her unit's support group. A local news station had already posted a photo someone took of the Marines lined up behind her. It had been shared thousands of times within hours. Comments poured in. This is what America's about. She's the face of true courage. Real warriors stand with their own. But she didn't feel famous. She felt held, and more than that, understood. Days passed, and word kept spreading. Danica got a call from a retired colonel in Washington, inviting her to speak at a leadership conference for wounded veterans. Then a local school asked if she'd visit to talk to their students about resilience and service. And the next Saturday, a small motorcycle club reached out and asked if she'd accept an apology ride in her honor. Veteran bikers who wanted to make things right, not for the sake of image, but because their hearts were stirred by her story. But for Danica, the real moment of change didn't come in front of a camera or a crowd. It came in the grocery store 2 weeks later. She was rolling through the frozen food aisle when she spotted the tall biker, the one who'd mocked her first. He wasn't with his crew this time. Just him, a cart, and a look that said he hadn't slept much. When their eyes met, he froze. For a long second, Danica said nothing. She didn't smile. She didn't glare. She just looked at him. And then he walked over slowly, shoulders hunched like a man dragging shame behind him. I shouldn't have done what I did, he said, his voice low and shaky. I didn't know. I didn't think. I was just being a coward, I guess. Danica tilted her head. Takes more guts to admit that than to pretend nothing happened. He rubbed the back of his neck. I saw the news. Saw the way those Marines stood for you. I used to think being tough meant scaring people. Now I think maybe it means standing up for people who can't. Danica studied him for a moment, then offered a small nod. It means standing up for people, whether they can or not. He managed a tight smile. Fair enough. She wheeled past him and paused. We all mess up, but if you really mean that, then prove it. Do something good with that second chance. He didn't reply, but his expression said he heard her loud and clear. As the days turned into weeks, a quiet ripple spread through Cedar Hill. The cafe painted a mural of Danica and blue, facing the sunrise, as a symbol of courage. A new bench was added outside City Hall with a plaque that read, "In honor of those who serve, and those who keep standing even when they can't walk." Kids started recognizing Danica in the park. Veterans from surrounding counties stopped by to shake her hand or just sit and talk. And for the first time since Kandahar, she felt whole, not because she had healed physically, but because her soul had found its place again. Her story wasn't about a wheelchair. It was about standing tall in a broken world. And the Marines who showed up? They reminded everyone watching that day that service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. Sometimes it begins again the moment someone needs you most. Danica still rolled through town with Blue at her side. She still drank her coffee, still taught at the community center. But now, when people saw her, they didn't see a disabled veteran. They saw a survivor, a leader, a spark, and every now and then a child would point and whisper, "That's the lady the Marines showed up for." But those who knew the real story understood something even greater. The Marines didn't just show up for her. They showed up because of her, and in doing so, they reminded an entire nation what it truly means to have each other's six, even long after the battlefield has gone quiet.